Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're learning Daf Nun Beis of Masechta Shabbos. I'll tell you, I'm a little bit nervous, mostly because they have this new rule in Israel that you're allowed to pray in a minyan. Like for a while, you weren't allowed to pray in a minyan because of the coronavirus. Now you're allowed to pray outside. But I live right next to this yeshiva, and they've really been enjoying praying outside. Mostly the making a lot of noise part. So we got this one guy out there right now. He's just by himself, but nonetheless he's making a lot of noise. So hopefully it won't be distracting. Well, with that introduction, today's daf is kind of interesting. Well, I don't know, every daf is kind of interesting, I guess, but there's I don't even know how to, I don't know, there's a lot of different opinions, let's just say, about stuff. I don't know how else to say it. So let's just go over the overview, the different pieces. So there's taking out a goat on a leash, okay? Anybody, your pet goat, can you take it out on a leash? What about taking a cow out? What about taking out an ox on a leash? Okay. Can you take out your para aduma on a leash? Now all of these things are going to have layers of machlokes. It's really interesting. A whole bunch of different random stuff with a bunch of different machlokes in. Collars, when you have a collar on an animal, can it become tameh? How do you put it in the mikveh? Things like that. And then at the end we have this student who asked Rabbi Eliezer about different things, and we get his response. So we're going to go into more detail, obviously, as we do the daf, and on the recap we'll go into more detail as well, but those are just kind of random stuff that we're doing. Let's go weiter, friends. So 4 lines into the page on daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Tana Devei Menashe. We learn in the Besmedrash of Reb Menashe, Eish Chokakla Ben Karnel. So if you have a goat, okay, and this goat has horns, and the thing is, if you were to take a rope and just wrap it around the neck of the goat, well, that wouldn't be really an effective leash, because the goat is going to move around a lot, and it can fall off, and the leash thing can slip off, and you'll end up carrying the leash 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah. So that's a problem. So don't wrap it around its head like you would do with a dog or something. But if you somehow put holes in its horns or something, and you can get the rope nice and tight and secure in the horns, well, then you can go out with it on Shabbos. Don't forget that. So you can take it out on its rope/leash kind of thing, as long as it's tied to its horns or fastened to its horns. By Rav Yosef has a kasha. Tochav la bizkana mao. So Rav Yosef wants to know, what if instead of getting out your drill and drilling holes in your goat's horns, you're just let me just tie it to my goat's goatee, right? So, ma'u. Do we say, Kevan di imintach la, kayev la, lo asilina tuche? So, do we say that, well, if the goat were to try to break free from our leash, it'll be uncomfortable for it, since it's going to be pulling on its goatee. So, it won't try to do that, so that would make it acceptable. We don't have to worry about you carrying it 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah if it gets away. So, Odilma zimnin derafi benafil va'asila asuye dalad amos b'Rosh Hashanah, or maybe sometimes the rope will get loose from the goatee, and you'll end up, you'll think that you're pulling the goat, and you'll turn around and the goat's gone, and you're just schlepping a leash 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah. Ayayay, teku. Guess what? We don't know the answer to such an amazing question. Can you put a leash? Can you tie a leash through the goatee of a goat? I don't know. Better to just drill a hole in its horns and fasten it that way. Tanan Hasam, we learn over there. Where's over there? In 2 pages. Daf Nun Beis Nun Daled Amud Beis. V'lo b'ritzua shebein karnel. You cannot take out an ox on Shabbos with a leash that is between its horns. Okay? tied to its horns. So now, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. So said Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Amma, Pligi ba Rav Shmuel. So Rav and Shmuel argue about, how exactly you can or cannot take out this ox with a rope tied between its horns. Okay. So Chad Amar, we don't know who says what, but one of them says, either Rav or Shmuel says, Bein Lenoy, Bein L'Shamer Aser. That whether you're going to take this rope and tie it up and braid it and weave it or something like that between the horns of the ox, and then just take it out, and you're not even holding this rope. It's just, it's purely there for design purposes, for beauty purposes. So that's why you're doing that. Or Bein L'Shamer, or whether you're actually going to be pulling the rope, the ox by the rope. So it's not just for beauty to look at and you're not going to touch it. You're actually going to be tying this rope to the horns and, guiding the ox with this rope as a leash. So, aser. Either way, whether it's lenoi, whether it's l'shamer, aser. How come it would be aser if it's as a leash? Because an ox, you don't actually, it's just going to go where you want it to go. You don't actually need the leash. And therefore, the leash is just extra protection. As we saw this machlokas yesterday, right? With machlokas between Chananya and the Tanakama about, is, netirusa yiserta, extra guarding, considered a masoy, a burden, which would make it aser, or not. Okay? So, this opinion seems to be that whether this rope is tied between the horns of this ox, whether it is as, lenoi, for just, it looks cool, or as a leash, it would not be allowed. Whereas the other opinion is that if it's just for beauty, because it looks cool, the ox would not be allowed to go out with it, because I guess it's not orcha, it's not normal, and therefore it would just be considered a masui and it would be carrying. However, you would be allowed to go out with it as a leash, because even though it's sort of not necessary, it will go where you want it to go anyways. However, extra guarding is fine. It wouldn't make it a masui. It's fine. You could take it out. So that's our machlokas, right? That's machlokas Rav and Shmuel. We don't know who says what, but now we're going to try to figure out who says what. Amar of Yosef. So now says Rav Yosef, Tistayim de Shmuel hu de Amar lenoi asur l'shamer mutter. So says Rav Yosef. So let's conclude that Shmuel is the one whose opinion is that while to have this rope between its horns it would be aser. While if it would just be for beauty, for noi, it would be aser. However, it would be permitted if it was, as a leash. Because, how come? The Amar of Huna Bar Chia Amar Shmuel Halacha Kechananya. Because one of the last things that we said yesterday is that Rav Huna Bar Chia says in the name of Shmuel that the halacha is like Chananya, that additional guarding is okay. That wouldn't make it a masui, a burden. Rather, additional guarding is fine, and you would be allowed to go out with additional guarding on Shabbos. And therefore, Shmuel it would make sense to say that it's Shmuel's opinion that if you're going to go out with an ox with a rope that you're going to be using as a leash to guide it, well, that would be okay, even though you don't really need it. It will go where you want anyways, but that would be okay. Amalei Abaye Adrabah. Abaye says to Rav Yosef, no, the opposite. Tistayim de Shmuel hu de Amar bein lenoi bein l'shamer aser. It would make sense to say that Shmuel is the opinion that whether you're tying this rope between the horns for a decoration or because you want to guide it, Shmuel would say that either way it would be forbidden. How come? Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because another thing that we saw yesterday, what did we see? That Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Machlif in lifnei Rebbe shel zo bazo mau. That the students switched around the opinions and asked Rebbe what would be the halacha. What are we talking about? That they said, what if a wild camel goes out with a simple rope, or a regular camel goes out with this heavy-duty nose ring? And then, within answering that question, Amar lefanav Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, if you remember from yesterday, that Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi said to Rebbe, Kach Amar Abba, that this is what my father Rabbi Yossi said, Arba be'emos yotzos be'afsar, there are 4 animals that can go out with a regular rope. Hasus, a horse, a pered, a mule, v'agamal, a camel, v'achamor, a donkey. And lav lemute gamal b'chatam. Now, was that not coming to say that and we said yesterday, right, that isn't the implication being that a camel can go out with an afsar, it can go out with a regular rope, but it would not be allowed to go out with this heavy-duty nose ring because it's netirusa yeserta, because it's extra guarding that's not needed, and therefore would be a masui. And we see that this was Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel saying over this incident with Rebbe and Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yossi, implying that Shmuel's opinion is that additional guarding would not be allowed. Additional guarding would not be allowed, and therefore, let's conclude that Shmuel is the one who says that whether you're tying this rope between the horns of the ox for decoration or as like a leash, it would not be allowed, since the leash is just extra protection, and that is not allowed. So what do we do? What do we do, friends? What do we do? On the one hand, we have Rav Yosef's opinion, that he seems to be making the argument that Shmuel would say that, taking out a ox with a leash, essentially, would be okay, because he says like Hananya, that extra guarding is okay. On the other hand, we have Abaye's, argument that Shmuel would say that extra protection is not allowed. Would be considered a burden. So the Gemara says an interesting answer. Samiha mikameha. Get rid of Abaye's argument. Look, what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? We're at a deadlock. We have one argument to say that Shmuel says, we have one proof really to say that Shmuel says that you would be allowed to go out with the leash for the ox. We have another proof to say that Shmuel would say that you're not. Alright, we gotta get rid of one of them, let's get rid of Abaye's. To which the Gemara asks the obvious question. My chazis, the misames ha, mikameha, samiha, mikameha. How come you just randomly, seemingly decided to get rid of Abaye's proof and favor of Yosef's proof to say that Shmuel would say that you would be allowed to take out an ox on a leash with a rope? Why not get rid of Abaye? Why not get rid of Rav Yosef's and accept Abaye's and say that you would not be allowed to take it out with this rope according to Shmuel? Well, so we have this parentheses over here. I have a note which basically changes the words kind of. So my Allah. So what do we do? What do we do? We have proofs either way to say, to say Shmuel basically, we don't have any proofs for Rab, but we basically have proofs for Shmuel proving that either one could be in. So check this out, friends. Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rab. So Rav Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rab, Bein Lenoy, Bein Lishamer Aser, Rav Chia bar Avin Amar Shmuel, Lenoy Aser Lishamer Mutter. So we have an opinion of Rav Chia bar Ashi and an opinion of Rav Chia bar Avin, and it works out perfectly. Rav Chia bar Ashi says in the name of Rab that whether you're taking out this ox with the rope between its horns for, beauty, for noi, or whether you're taking it out to, pull it with a leash, it will be forbidden. That is Rav's opinion, because I guess he'll say that extra guarding is not allowed and will be a burden. Whereas Rav Chia bar Avin says in the name of Shmuel that while taking out this ox with this rope between its horns for beauty would not be allowed, but if you're pulling it, it would be allowed, even though it's not necessary, it would be allowed because Shmuel holds like Hananya that extra guarding is acceptable. Meisvei, we have a kasha on Rav. Rav had said that, if you pull out this ox with a leash, it's not allowed. Well, here's the question. Kasha ba'aleh b'mosera kshera. We say that if, this is talking about a para aduma, the red heifer, it has to be, part of the, as we're going to see in a minute, part of the requirements for a red heifer is that asher lo Allah aleh o, that it never wore a yoke. It never did any work, it never wore a yoke. And we're saying that even though it's not allowed to wear a yoke, the owners would be allowed to tie a rope between its horns and pull it. I assume it's talking about between its horns, but you could basically tie it as a, I assume it's between the horns, since that's why it would be a good question. But we're saying you could tie it up with a rope and you could pull it. Now, v'isa kadaitich masoihu, and if Rav, you're correct that tying this rope between the horns of the ox would be a masoi, and that's why it's not allowed on Shabbos. Well, asher lo Allah aleh ol amr achmana. What do you do with the fact that it says that when it comes to a red heifer, you wouldn't be able to have any kind of a yoke on it, or I guess any kind of a burden on it, and therefore, according to you, Rav, who you say that tying this rope between the horns of the ox would be considered a burden, well then how come you're allowed to do it by a red heifer, that we have to be so particular to make sure that it doesn't have any kind of yoke or any kind of burdens on it? So Amar Abaye, so we have three answers. Amar Abaye b'molicha le'ir le'ir. One way you could say is that, well, it's actually different when you're walking it between cities, such as what's happening with this red heifer. That when you're walking it between cities, well then the ox is going to want to go and like pasture and stuff like that, and therefore you actually really do need this rope in order to get it to go where you want it to go, right? That notion of the ox is just going to go where you want it to go without the rope is not true anymore when you're going between cities, and that's why you're allowed to tie the horn, tie this rope, and it wouldn't be considered a burden; it would be considered necessary. Rava Amar Shiny Para Damea Yikarin. Rava says a para aduma, a red heifer, is different because it's so unique and so rare and so expensive that you're always going to be doing things that are more protective when it comes to the para aduma, and that is why even though by a regular ox, it would be considered unnecessary protection to tie this rope around the normal ox, but when it comes to para aduma, because it's so expensive and unique and rare and valuable, you're always doing sort of more protective things, and that is why you're allowed to tie a rope around a para aduma. Ravina Amar b'moredes. Ravina says this is when it's a naughty para aduma that is rebellious, and therefore you would be allowed to tie it with a rope, and it wouldn't be considered additional protection that is unnecessary. Hasus b'shir v'chulei. Right, so the Mishnah goes on and says that you're allowed to take out a horse, or anything that you normally put a collar around its neck. You are allowed to take them out on Shabbos with their collar, and mistama with a leash also. Okay. My yotzin umay nimshachin. So the Mishnah had said, right, yotzin b'shir v'nimshachin b'shir. Okay, but these animals, they can go out with their collar and they can be pulled by their collar, like with a leash. Okay, so my yotzin umay nimshachin. What is this going out and what is this being pulled? Amar of Huna, o yotzin kruchin o nimshachin. Yotzin means either they can go out with their leash just kind of wrapped around their neck, even though you're not actually using the leash. That would be acceptable. As Rashi says, it wouldn't be considered a masui. I mean, the Rashi dibra maschil yotzin kruchin at the end of it. Dilenoi nami or chayuhu. Because even just for like some kind of a decoration, I guess, it would be considered normal to have this leash just wrapped around, let's say, the horse or the dog or whatever it might be. So you can go out with this leash just kind of wrapped around its neck, even though you're not actually using the leash at all. Onim shachin. Or alternatively, you can actually be pulling the animal with this leash. Either way is fine. Ushmol Amar yotzin nimshachin ve'ein yotzin kruchin. Whereas Shmuel is more strict, and he says, no, you can only take out this horse with the leash that you're actually using to pull the horse, but if it's just wrapped around its neck, that wouldn't be allowed. It would just be a masui, a burden. B'masnisa Tana, we talk about in a brisa, yotzin kruchin limashech. Oh, so this is like an interesting other opinion, which is you can take out the animal with the leash just wrapped around its neck, but it would have to be in such a way that you can pull it if you need to, meaning leave some kind of space as like a handle almost, so that in the event that you actually need to grab the animal, you have a place to hold on to it. So If you would simply just wrap the leash around the neck, that would not be allowed. But if you wrap it in such a way that you'll actually have a way to like hold on to it if you need to, well then that would be acceptable. Amr of Yosef, said Rav Yosef, Chazina lehu leigle de Rav Huna yotzin ba'afserein kruchen b'Shabbos. So Rav Yosef said that he saw the calves of Rav Huna, okay, that exactly as Rav Huna said, right? Rav Huna had said that this rope can be either wrapped or being actually pulled. And Rav Yosef said, I actually witnessed myself that the calves of Rav Huna's house would go out on Shabbos with these ropes simply wrapped around their necks, even though nobody was pulling the rope. Very good. Kias Rav Dimi, Amar Rab Chanina. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, so he said in the name of Rab Chanina that Mol'os shall base Rebbe, that the mules of Rebbe's house, I believe I defined that correctly. Mol'os, prados, right, mules. Yeah, so he said that the mules of Rebbe's house, Yotzos be'afserein b'Shabbos, they would go out on Shabbos with their ropes. Oh, there's Bobo. Bo. There is. Bo, Asiri, Kanes. But I guess not Kanes, because Kanes means go inside, but he's outside. Bo. Okay, anyways. So Kiyasa Rav Dimi, Amar Rabbi Chanina. So when Rav Dimi came, he said the name of Rabbi Chanina, that Molo Shabes Rebbe, that the mules of Rebbe's household, so they would go out with their rope on Shabbos. Now, it doesn't say if they were being pulled by the rope, or if they were just wrapped around their necks, okay? Now, Ibailu, so they asked, Kruchon onim shachin. Well, great. So the animals would go out with these ropes, but were the ropes wrapped around their neck? Were they being pulled by them? So Tashma, come in here. Kiyasar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Rab Chanina. So when Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said in the name of Rab Chanina, he gives us some crucial information. Molos shall base Rebbe, these mules of Rebbe's house, Yotos ba'afserein kruchim b'Shabbos. They would go out with these ropes that were actually just simply wrapped around their necks, and that was enough. So Rebbe seemed to, be okay with these ropes simply being wrapped around the neck, even though you're not actually pulling it by these ropes, like Rav Huna's opinion. Okay. Now, Amur Rabbanan Kamedra of Asi. So now the rabbis said in front of Rav Asi, like these, they were discussing when Rav Dimi came and said that the mules of Rebbe would go out with these, ropes, and then Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda said that, they would have to get pulled by the rope. The ropes were simply wrapped around their necks. So, and now these students said in front of Rav Asi, they said, Hadir Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda lo tzricha. I don't need Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. I don't need him to tell me that these ropes were simply wrapped around the necks of the mules, because midu Rav Dimi nafka, because I know that simply from Rav Dimi. Even though Rav Dimi didn't say specifically that these ropes were simply wrapped around the necks of these mules, I would know that on my own. How come? The Isa Kadaitech Rav Dimi nimshachin kamar, because if it enters your mind that Rav Dimi was simply saying that these mules were being pulled by these ropes on Shabbos, well, midu Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel nafka, I already know that from our incident with Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, which we've already quoted twice. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Machlifin hayu lifnei Rebbe shalzo bazo mau, that they were discussing in front of Rebbe. What if you flip around sort of the wild camel with the rope and the regular camel with the heavy duty nose ring? Amar lefan of Rabbi Shema Rabbi Yossi. Then Rabbi Shema Rabbi Yossi, of course, perked up and he said, Kach Amar Abba, this is what my father Rabbi Yossi said. Ayba behemus yotzes ba'afsar. That there are 4 animals that go out with a leash, i.e. you could pull them with a leash, asus, ve'aperet, ve'agamol, ve'achamor, right? What's it called? A horse and a mule and a camel and a donkey. And therefore, I already know that I can take out an animal, right, with a leash on Shabbos. So and this was all happening in front of Rebbe, right? Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi said in front of Rebbe that you can take out a mule with a leash on Shabbos. So then, what's the chiddush of Rav Dimi? The chiddush of Rav Dimi must be that you can take out the leash, that Rebbe's animals not only went out with a leash, but that the leash was simply wrapped around their neck, even though they weren't being pulled by the leash. Otherwise, if Rav Dimi is just saying that they were being pulled, well, we know that already from this story with Rebbe and Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. But Amrluhu Rav Asi said to his students, actually, it's tzrichlihu. We actually do need both Rav Dimi and Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, or Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Because I wouldn't know from Rav Dimi that the animals of Rebbe were just going out with the leash simply wrapped around their necks. How come? Di'i mid Rav Yehuda nafka, because if all we knew was Rav Yehuda, well then Hava Amina Amar lefanav v'lo kibla minei. I may have thought that while Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi did in fact say in front of Rebbe that his father would say that there are these 4 animals, including the mules, that can go out with their rope on Shabbos, but maybe Rebbe didn't accept Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi's opinion, and maybe Rebbe still felt that these animals would not be allowed to go out with a leash on Shabbos at all. So Kamash Malan Rav Dimi, so therefore we have Rav Dimi to tell us that actually Rebbe did accept Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi's assertion that you would be allowed to go out with an animal. An animal would be allowed to go out with this rope on Shabbos. However, I still wouldn't know if that rope, you need to be pulling the animal by the rope, or if the rope can simply be wrapped around its neck. And if, as I just said, if we would only have Rav Dimi, I might think that that's only if you're actually pulling the animal by the rope. But if the rope is simply tied around its neck, that wouldn't be allowed. Therefore, we have Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda to say not only were these mules going out with the rope was simply wrapped around the neck, and even though you weren't actually pulling it by this rope. Okay. Oh, man. Oh, man. Okay, friends, it's official. I'm competing with the Leshem Yeshiva. Wish me luck. I will try my best to teach. Well, no, I don't teach anything. I'll try my best to share. Ooh, is somebody yelling at them? No, probably not. Maybe. Yeah, it's a big balagan. Big balagan. Big balagan. Okay, let's go weiter. Alright, I'm focused. I'm determined. Okay, umazin alen v'tovlan bimkoman. Okay, so we said that, so if you have an animal with this collar, and this collar is tameh, okay, so we say that you would be allowed to sprinkle this like ash water of the para aduma on the collar. You wouldn't have to take the collar off of the animal. We also said that you can put just put the animal in the mikvah. You wouldn't have to take it off of the animal in order to put the thing in the mikvah. Now, the question is, can the collar of an animal really become tameh? Okay, so the Meimah de Bnei Kabule Tumaninu, is that to say that the collars of these animals are actually able to be makabel tumah? V'atnam, we have a Mishnah that says tabas adam tmeh v'tabas behema v'chelim u'sha'ar kol atabaos Tahoros. So we have a Mishnah though that says that only the rings of a person can become tameh, like the rings that you put on your finger epis or whatever it might be, right? So that ring can become tameh. However, the rings of an animal, the rings of kalim, like let's say you have a spatula in your kitchen, and at the end of a spatula there's like a ring. So that ring would only be considered a tachshit. It wouldn't actually be considered a kli. It would be considered like a jewelry, a tachshit. Some kind of like adornment for your spatula, and as Rashi on the first Rashi and in Beis Mabei says, the ein tachshit l'chli. There's no such concept of it as an adornment for a kli, and therefore it would not be mekabel tumah. So we say that only these rings that belong to a person can become tameh. However, rings that belong to an animal or to kalim do not become tameh, and therefore this collar that belongs to this animal would not be able to become tameh. So how come we're talking about this collar of this animal becoming tameh and going to the mikvah and azaras paraduma, things like that? So we have two answers, two suggestions now. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. So it says Rabbi Yitzchak b'bayin minoi adam l'noi behema. So Rabbi Yitzchak says that this is talking about a collar that was initially for a human. I don't know why a human would want a collar, but whatever it is, it was initially made for a human, and therefore when it was made for a human, so it was a tabas for a human, and a human, and therefore it was able to become tumah, and in fact it actually did become Tameh. And then you decided to make it for your animal, and now you still have to put it in the mikveh. So that is what we're talking about. Rav Yosef Amar, Hoil v'adam moshech bayim es behema. So that's Rav Yosef's opinion. So Rav Yosef's opinion is that actually in this case, right, since this collar is made to be used, kilu, as like a leash for an animal, and you're going to be pulling the animal by it, so therefore it's basically a kli. As Rashi says, in the Rashi Dibra Maskal, Hov Adam Moshech B'enes HaBehema, Chashiv Le Kli Tashmish Adam. It's considered like a kli that is for a person, and a person's kalim, a person's vessels can become tameh, and therefore this collar is also able to become tameh. Milo Tanya, because after all, don't we have a brayso that says, Makol Shal Behema, if you have a stick that you use to hit an animal with, so shama teches, if it's made out of metal, so makabel tuma. So matam, right? So we say if it's made out of metal, so you have a metal stick that, it's for an animal, but it's a kli that a person uses in order to control an animal. So we say it can become tameh, matam. How come? So by this stick that's used to control the animal, so it's able to become tameh since a person uses it to hit and control this animal. So here also this collar of the animal, since a person uses it in order to pull the animal, uses it for the animal, so therefore it can also become tameh. That's the machlokas between Rabbi Yitzchak and Rav Yosef. So then it says that you can put this collar into the mikveh, right? So how can you put the collar into the mikveh, right? By putting the collar into the mikveh, right? Because when you put something into the mikveh, there can't be what's called a chatzitza, right? A chatzitza means that there's something separating between the thing that's going into the mikveh and, right, that's not allowing the water to get there. So for example, if you have like a glass bottle, a glass pitcher that you just bought, and there's like the barcode that's on a sticker that's like stuck onto it. So you're going to have to remove that barcode so that water can get to the area that would otherwise be under the barcode, right? So here you have this collar and it became tameh, right? Whether it's because you hold like Rabbi Yitzchak, that it became tameh when it was still being used for a person, or whether you're like Rav Yosef who says that since it's, used to guide the animal, it would become tameh. Whatever it is, you're putting it in the mikveh. But the thing is, where the ring is stuck into the collar, the ring that you then put the strap in, the leash in, so that ring is stuck into the collar super tight, and therefore water isn't going to be able to get into that area. So then won't there be a chatzitza? So that's the kasha. So Rabbi Ami, so it says Rabbi Ami, bisherischan. So it's talking about where you like took a hammer and you knocked around the ring to widen the area between the ring and the collar, and therefore water can now get in over there. Okay. Shleim Rabbi Ami, Rav Yosef Svirle. So let's say that Rabbi Ami makes sense according to Rav Yosef, because according to Rav Yosef, he says that this collar was always used for an animal. This collar was always used for an animal, and therefore, by widening this hole around the ring, it really doesn't matter. Meaning this was a collar that was always intended to be for an animal. It can be for an animal whether the hole around the ring is wide, whether the hole around the ring is tight. So therefore, by widening the hole around the ring, it really doesn't, change anything in terms of the status of the strap and its usability, of the collar and its usability. However, the Rabbi Yitzchak, that if we say that Rabbi Ami's opinion is like Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Ami's opinion, which is that you are taking a hammer and like widening the area, banging around the area where the ring is to make it the hole wider. Well, Damar Bivayin Minoi Adam L'Noi Behema, that Rabbi Yitzchak says that initially this collar was used for humans, and then it was transferred to be used for an animal. Well, guess what? Kevin de Rischan, once you make this hole around the ring really wide, well, Avid Buhu Maisa, you have now officially done an action, an activity to this collar. Ufarcha latuma minayu, and now by widening this area around the ring, the tuma now goes away from this collar. How come? Let's go weiter, shtickle. The Tnan, as we learn in the Mishnah, kol hakelim yordin lidei tumasim b'machshava, that any kli can become tameh just by your intention, by your thought. Ve'en olin mitumasa ela b'shinoi maise, but it only leaves its status of tuma with an activity. What does this mean? This means that if I'm building a kli, let's say I'm building, a bookshelf, okay? Let's say I'm building a bookshelf and I want it to have 3 levels, okay? So now it's only going to be able to be makabel tuma once it's complete, okay? And as the pasuk says, What does the pasuk say? It says, right, klei maise. It says, right, and therefore, it says in the pasuk, klei maise. Well, what's the pasuk? It says, vayikach Moshe ve'Elazar hakohen es hazav me'itam kol klei maise. And therefore, in order for a kli to be makabel tuma, it has to be something that you can use. And until it's finished, until it's complete, it's not yet able to be makabel tuma. So let's say I'm building this bookshelf, and it's going to have 3 layers. It's going to have 3 shelves, right? So it's not going to be makabel tuma until I've completed, all 3 shelves, and I'm ready to put it in where I want it, right? What if after I finished 1 shelf, I decided, you know what? I don't want a 3-shelf bookshelf. I just want 1 shelf on it, right? And you put up that 1 shelf, and as far as you're concerned, you're done. Well, at that point, this bookshelf is going to be able to be makabel tuma because you decided in your mind that it's complete, so now it can be makabel tuma. And in order for it to, go back, if you then decide, you know what, actually I do want to add those additional 2 shelves. Well, it's still going to be makabel tuma once you had that initial thought that it was done. And the only way that you're going to undo that initial thought is to actually do an activity, to actually start adding those 2 additional shelves. And by doing so, you show, okay, I meant business when I said that I changed my mind, and this bookshelf is not yet complete. And therefore, so by doing a maise, you show that the way that it was originally was not complete, and therefore it shouldn't be. Whatever tuma may have happened to it when it was in its previous state goes away until you have completed whatever activity you want to do. Therefore, going back to our case, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, right, who said that originally when this thing became tameh, it was when it was for, being used by a human, and it became tameh. However, and it's going to remain in a status of tumah, because initially when this collar was made, it was made for a human, it was considered complete, it became tameh, it's tameh. However, when you transfer it to be for an animal, so it remains tameh, but once you make that area around the ring bigger, you're actually doing a maise, you're doing an action, and this is no longer going to be usable for a human once there's that huge hole around the ring, right? You're clearly showing, like, it's official. I am never going to be using this for human use anymore, and you do an activity to indicate that by making the hole around the ring bigger. Well, by doing that, you're basically indicating that the way that this collar was initially is now considered incomplete, and it's now, you're doing something to it to make it specifically for an animal, and therefore the original kli, this original collar, becomes batel, and the tuma should go away, and therefore that would be a problem for Rabbi Yitzchak, because according to Rabbi Yitzchak, why would you ever even have to be putting this collar into the mikvah? Why should it have to go to the mikvah? Because, if it's, because there's going to be a chatzitza, so how can you put it in the mikvah? And if you can say, well, because you put a hole around it, well, then it shouldn't have to go to the mikvah anyways, because you just, showed that the way that it was originally, you undid the status of a kli that it had originally when you made the hole wider. Okay? So it's going to be hard to sort of explain for Rabbi Yitzchak, why this collar that was initially for human use, that became tameh, you would have to be putting into the mikvah. Because if you don't make the hole around it wider, well then it would be chatzitza. And if you do make it wider, well then you don't have to put it in the mikvah anymore. So the Gemara answers, Savala Rabbi Yehuda, it's because Rabbi Yitzchak holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says, Tamar maise l'saken lav maise hu. The Rabbi Yehuda says that any ma'aseh, any activity that you make to fix it, isn't actually considered a ma'aseh. Let's just go weiter for a second. The Tanas we learn in a brayso. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda lo amru shinoi maaseh l'sakin ela l'kalkal. That this shinoi maaseh is not to fix it, it's to break it. What does that mean? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, what's the case of like where I thought to make it one thing and change it to something else? So it's talking about where if I have like a hide, if I have a hide of an animal and I say, I'm going to use this hide as like a rug. So you go, you tan it, and now you just have like a piece of hide you're going to put on your floor, and that's your rug. And you decide, and so it's able to be makabel tuma now. Now, if you decide, forget it. I don't want this hide to be a rug. I want to cut it up into strips and make it into belts. Well, it's very nice that you had that thought, but it's still going to be makabel tuma until you actually cut it up into strips and make it into a belt. And by doing that, you clearly show that, this can no longer be a rug. You mamish like cut it into strips. It's just not possible to be a rug. You're breaking it. However, in our case, right, and that's why this maaseh would undo it from its original status of a kli. However, in this case of a collar, you're not changing it into something else. You're simply making the hole around the ring a bit wider. Maybe you're making it better so that, it could be, you put it in the mikveh, whatever it is, but you're not, you're tweaking it. You're adding a feature, but you're not completely changing the nature of what it is. Therefore, it wouldn't actually be considered a maaseh, and that's why Rabbi Yitzchak would argue that it would remain tameh. That's why it would remain tameh. And even according to Rabbi Yitzchak, who says that initially it was for human, this collar was made for a human, and then you transferred it to an animal, and then you had to make the hole around the ring wider so you could put it in the mikveh. It doesn't matter. It still remains tameh because it's not considered a maaseh that's going to change it and remove it from its initial tumah status. Wow, that was a pretty involved machlokas. And then the Gemara just kind of concludes, and b'masnisa tani b'mecholal. And by the way, there's a brisa that says that we're talking about a collar that already had a hole around the ring, and it wasn't actually super tight, and water was able to get into it anyways, and you didn't have to do anything to the collar, which is a much simpler answer. Okay. So a certain student from the Upper Galilee asked Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, the Tana, Shamaiti shechokin ben tabas to tabas, and this student said to Rabbi Eliezer, I've heard that there are differences between types of rings. And he said, look, I don't know what these differences are. Can you tell me what they are? Amrlo, Shemalo shamaita linyan Shabbis, the linyan tuma David achadahi. Rabbi Eliezer said, look, I have to assume that these differences between rings, you're saying specifically talking about Shabbos. That when it comes to Shabbos, so a ring, as Rashi points out, that we're going to learn on Daf Samach, that a ring that has a seal on it, you would not be able to go out with it on Shabbos. However, I think that is correct. What is it? I'm in Rashi, Dibra Masel El in Shabbos. So he doesn't actually say which one would be allowed to go out with and which one is not, but that there's a difference between if the ring has a seal on it or if the ring doesn't have a seal on it. I assume it's like a seal that you would use to kind of stamp closed items to show that they weren't tampered with. I assume that if it has a seal, then you probably wouldn't be allowed to go out with it because it's more of a kli or something. But if it doesn't have a seal, it's a tachshit probably. Anyways, so Rabbi said, look, the only difference that there is between rings is when it comes to taking them out on Shabbos. But in terms of tumah, all rings are going to be the same. So Amrlo. Fine, one second. So then the Gemara says, tumah davida achasi? Is that really true? That regarding tumah, all rings are the same? I thought we just said, Ve'atnan, tabas adam tmeh, v'tabas behema, v'chelim, usharko atabos tohoros. I thought we just quoted a Mishnah that says that only rings belonging to humans, to people, are able to be makabel tumah. However, rings belonging to animals or like rings on other kelim, and all other rings would be tohoros. So why are we saying that there's no difference about rings when it comes to tumah? So ki ka'amar le'iu nami de adam ka'amar le. No, when Rabbi Eliezer said that there's no difference between rings regarding tumah, it means human rings. Rings for humans, then there's no difference between rings regarding tumah. They are all makabel tumah. But uda adam davida achasi. But one second, even human rings are all the same regarding tumah. Ve'atanya. But we learn in a brisa, tabaz she'eskina lachagorbo mosnav, a ring that you're using as a belt buckle, ulakasher bein kseifav, or a ring that you're using to hold up your sleeves, tahora. We're saying that they're not able to be makabel tumah. The only ring for a human that would be makabel tumah is a ring that you put on your finger. So why is Rabbi Eliezer saying that all human rings, there's no difference between them? So the Gemara answers, Ki ka'amar le'iu nami de etzba ka'amar le. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer, when he was saying that there's no difference regarding tumah of rings, it's talking about rings that you put on your finger. With the etzba davda achasi, but one second, even rings on your finger, they're all the same. Ve'atnan, tabas shamateches v'chosama shel almog. If you have a ring that is made out of metal, but its seal is made out of this wood, so tmeyahi, it's going to be makabel tumah, because we go based on the ring, not based on the seal. Shel almog, if the ring is made out of wood, v'chosama shel mateches, and its seal is made out of metal, tahora, it's tahora, because the ring itself is made out of wood, and we know that pshute clay eitz, right, just regular pieces of wood that don't have a receptacle in them, are not makabel tumah. So the Gemara answers, Ki ka'amar le'iu nami kula shel mateches ka'amar le. No, when Rabbi Eliezer was saying that there's no difference right, between these rings, it means rings that are completely made out of metal, okay? And therefore, basically, this student was asking Rabbi Eliezer, rings that are made out of metal, I've heard that there are differences, and Rabbi Eliezer said, look, there are differences in terms of can you take them out on Shabbos, right? If it has a seal, it'll be one halacha. If it doesn't have a seal, it'll be another halacha. But in terms of tumah, if it's made entirely out of metal, it's all going to be the same. V'od sha'al, and this student asked another question from Rabbi Eliezer, Shamaiti shechoken be'machad lemachad. He said, look, I've heard that there are differences between different kinds of needles. Amrlo shemelo shamaita elinin Shabbos, dilinin tumah davada achasi. Right? And Rabbi Eliezer says, look, you probably only heard that there are differences regarding if you can take out a needle on Shabbos, that a needle that has a hole in it, that it's for a thread, and you would not be allowed to carry in Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, or take out to Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos. And if it doesn't have a hole in it, i.e. it's just like a safety pin, well then I guess it would be a tachshit, and you would be allowed to go to take it out to Rosh Hashanah. However, regarding tumah, they, whether the needle has a hole in it or whether it doesn't, they're going to be mekabel tumah equally. Is that true that regarding tumah, whether or not it has a hole, it's mekabel tumah? But we learn in a Mishnah, machat shenital chora o ukta tahora. We say that if you have a needle that its hole was clipped off of it, or its sharp end was clipped off of it, it is tahora. So why would Rabbi Eliezer be saying that all needles would be makabel tumah? So kika amrle bishlema. Rabbi Eliezer is saying a whole needle that hasn't been broken in any way. Any whole needle is going to be makabel tumah, and there's no differences at all. Uvishlema davida achasi. But when it comes to whole needles, all whole needles are makabel tumah equally. V'atnan machat she'elasa chaluda. That if you have a needle, which could be a complete whole needle, but it has rust on it, if the rust prevents you from being able to sew properly with it, well then it will be tahora. It's no longer makabel tumah. Ve'im lav tamea. But if there's no rust on it, or even if there is rust, but it doesn't prevent you from sewing with it, well then it will be makabel tumah. And Rabbi Yana says that when we say that it is mikabel tumah, even if it has a little bit of rust on it, that you still have to be able to tell that. I mean, even if we said that if you are able to still sew with it, even though there's rust on it, it's still mikabel tumah. Well, it has to be recognizable as a needle. However, even if you can technically sew with it, but you can't recognize it as a needle because there's so much rust on it, so then it wouldn't be mikabel tumah anymore. Okay, so we see that there is a difference between whole needles based on if they have rust on it. So kikamarle b'shifa. No, when Rabbi Eliezer says that there's no difference, talking about a needle that is polished and doesn't have rust on it. Ka'amarle. Fine, uv'shifa, and even if it's polished, davada achasi, they're all the same. Ve'atanya machat bein nekuva bein eina nekuva. That if you have a needle, whether it has a hole in it or whether it doesn't have a hole in it, mutter tatla b'Shabbos, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. It's not mukta, since you can use it to remove a splinter, so it kilo has a purpose. Nekuva, the only time when it makes a difference if it has a hole in it is el inyan tumah bovad, is regarding tumah. So why is Rabbi Eliezer saying that a needle that is whole, that doesn't have any rust, that is polished, there's no difference when it comes to tumah? We seem to have a brisa that is saying that actually a needle that has a hole in it would be makabel tumah. A needle that doesn't have a hole in it would not be makabel tumah. So ha tirgma abai aliba derava begalmi. So a needle that does not have a hole in it would not be makabel tumah. And Abai says, according to Rava, that that's talking about a raw needle, meaning a needle that doesn't have a hole in it, not because you're not planning on putting a hole in it, but because you just haven't yet put the hole in it. So in that case, it's not yet a clean, and that's why it's not makabel tumah. However, a needle that you weren't planning on putting a hole in it, it would be makabel tumah, and a needle that has a hole in it would also be makabel tumah. So when it comes to needles, whether they have a hole in it, whether they don't have a hole in it, they're makabel tumah, assuming that that's the way that the needle was meant to be. But regarding Shabbos, only a needle that has a hole in it, you would be chayav for taking it out on Shabbos. But a needle that does not have a hole in it, it would be allowed to take it out on Shabbos. Wow, that was today's daf. That was interesting daf, because I got a little bit shaken up and messed up by the distractions outside. But I think we managed to get through it. I think we did. So let us do a recap of this page. So we started out by taking out a goat on a leash, and we said that if you kind of like stick it into the horns, that would make it okay. We asked, what if you stick it into the beard? And we said, we'll have to ask Eliyahu Hanavi when he comes. Then we talked about, can you take out a cow with a leash that is between its horns? So we have Machlokes Rav and Shmuel, and we didn't know who said what. So one opinion was that if it's for beauty, or if it's if it's for beauty, then you would not be allowed to take it out with this leash behind its horns. But if it was for guarding it, even though it's not necessary because the ox will go where you want it to go, but nonetheless, additional guarding is acceptable. The other opinion was that no, whether it's for beauty or whether it's for additional guarding, it would be forbidden. Rav Yosef says that it would make sense to say that Shmuel is the one who says that if you're taking out with this leash for extra guarding, it would be permitted, because he says like Hananya, that extra guarding is okay. Abai says no, actually Shmuel should say that both for beauty and for extra guarding is forbidden, because of that story that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel with Rebbe and Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, that there are the 4 animals that go out with the leash, but specifically with the leash, but not with that ring through their nose, implying that extra guarding is not allowed. And then we ultimately said that Rav Chia Bar Ashi quotes Rav as saying that both for beauty and for extra guarding are forbidden, and Rav Chia Bar Avin says in the name of Shmuel that for beauty it would be not allowed, but for extra protection it would be allowed. So there you have it. Rav is the one who says that both for beauty and for extra guarding is not allowed, and Shmuel says that while for beauty it's not allowed, for extra guarding it is allowed. We talked about pulling a para aduma on a leash, right? If according to Rav it would be considered a masui, then how come we're allowed to pull a para aduma by a rope? So Abai says, well, it's because it's going from city to city, in which case it's not considered extra protection, it's just considered necessary to prevent it from grazing in the fields. Rava says it's because a para aduma is very expensive, and therefore you want to be extra careful with it in general. And Ravina says that it is talking about a para aduma that was misbehaving, and therefore you needed to tie a rope to it. We talked about taking out animals with their collars on Shabbos. Rav Huna said that you could take out an animal with its collar, whether it's simply wrapped around its neck or if you're actually using it as like a leash. Shmuel says no, it would have to be that you're using it as a leash. It would not be enough to simply wrap it around the neck. We have a brisa that says that actually you wrap it around the neck in such a way, I mean, either you can pull it with a leash or you can wrap it around the neck in such a way that at least you'll be able to grab onto it if you need to. And then we also said that by the house of Rebbe, they would take out their mules on Shabbos, even though the rope was simply wrapped around the neck and they weren't actually pulling it. We talked about the collars of animals becoming tameh. Rabbi Yitzchak said it's because these are collars that were initially being used for humans, and then were later adapted for animals, and they become tameh when they were used for humans. Rav Yosef says that since a person is using it to pull the animal, so it's basically a kli, and the kli is able to be makabel tuma. We talked about putting a collar in the mikvah. What do we do about chatzitza, right? If the ring is in there super tight, then how's the water going to get in? So according to Rav Yosef, it's no. So we said that you're going to have to make the hole around the ring bigger. So according to Rav Yosef, that's no problem, because so it's still useful for a animal. He says that it's able to become tameh because this is a collar that is always been used for an animal, but because a human uses it for the animal, it's considered it's able to be makabel tuma. And when you make the hole bigger, it's still going to be makabel tuma. It's still usable for an animal. According to Rabbi Yitzchak, however, who says that initially was for a human, well, once you make that hole around the ring bigger, well, then it's no longer going to be able to be used for human use, and therefore it's like you're being mevatel the original kli. So we say that Rabbi Yitzchak holds like Rabbi Yehuda that just being mitaken the kli, the maisa that you're going to make, or to make the hole bigger around the ring, when you're just sort of tweaking and adding a feature to the original kli, that's not really considered a maisa that's going to be mevatel the original status of the kli. It's going to remain tameh, and by putting it in the mikvah, you'll make it tahor. There was another brisa that said actually we're talking about a collar that actually has big holes already, so this whole making the hole bigger thing is irrelevant. We had the student who asked Rabbi Eliezer about rings, and Rabbi Eliezer said that the only time that there's a difference between rings is in terms of hotzah on Shabbos, that it depends if it has a seal or not, but in terms of tumah, it makes no difference. And then the student asked about needles, and again, Rabbi Eliezer said that the only time that there is going to be a difference between needles is in terms of hotzah on Shabbos. If it has a hole, it would be considered hotzah. If it doesn't, it would not. And regarding to Tumah, it would be the same. Thanks everybody for learning. I hope we managed to make it happen today, even with the distractions. Have an awesome day or night. Peace.